Hi, everyone. This is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, and tonight's going to be an extremely interesting discussion, I would say. And I'm interviewing Shane the Ruiner for the second time. So our topic tonight is actually ETs, gods, angels, or demons. The idea is we're questioning, just actually having a discussion about the question because the answer is probably endless. But at any rate, talking about ETs, how they're perceived, how they're often perceived as gods, angels, or demons, and how maybe all of those and none of those is correct. So that's our topic for the evening. And my guest again is Shane the Ruiner, and this is our second interview. And those of you that have seen the first interview will know that he is a fascinating guy. And let me get him on the screen here. So Shane, now you're live and in color. Say hello to everyone.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you again. It's nice to be
And I think your sound is a little low, so if you could maybe speak a little louder. I'm going to see what mine looks like over here. And I don't, at the moment, I'm not sure how I'm going to, I don't have two computers. I'm actually traveling right now. So logistics, I don't know if I'll be able to catch. I might be able to figure out the questions. And if there was anyone out there that can help, then let me know if you can help or something like that. Not sure how you'll do that, but anyway, okay. So I guess what I want to say here is that Shane is, well, I dubbed him as an Illuminati whistleblower last time. I necessarily refer to himself in that way. I'm not sure. But we did talk a lot about last time about the blue avians and various other subjects. And this time we really want to widen the parameters of what we're going to discuss, as I say, because I just want to sort of set this up, if that's okay with you, Shane, and say that, you know, out in the community, if you want to call it a community, very loosely sense of the word, is that people are tending to do what they did a long time ago when the Anunnaki arrived, which is kind of put the person who is reporting about the Anunnaki on a pedestal. So they're putting, you know, like they did in the religious texts with Abraham or Moses or whoever, or let's say Mohammed, whoever says they had ET contact, in essence, calls them gods, and then what they have to say, what they think, and so on. And I think this is a very dangerous ground to go down, road to go down. And I wanted to talk to Shane about that. His perspective, coming as he does from growing up in a kind of Illuminati, I guess you may say, family, and being trained in some of those ways, and then my own sort of background, having not been trained in those ways, but having studied it, preparation for what I do in Project Camelot. So that's kind of the setup for tonight's discussion. Shane, why don't you give yourself some background to start off with, and just kind of introduce yourself, talk a little bit about how you got into being the so-called ruiner, and because that's a very interesting sort of moniker, and also what you're doing now.
Well, it started with, and I posted it publicly on the internet. It wasn't promoted in any way, but it got picked up by various online or alternative community forums, and other people like yourself who started reaching out to me, and we ended up talking, and that's how a lot of people kind of came to know me. Actually, it was between the blog and my first interview with you. Since then, I finished the blog. I haven't written anything more to the Ruiner blog. I've written a new blog called The Whole World Laughing, and started doing podcasts with guests of my own, just people that I've met through the alternative community, and letting them share their stories, or encouraging them to share their stories, because there's a lot of people out there who've had various type of contact with the paranormal, extraterrestrials, what have you, secret societies, various black ops programs and stuff like that, who have stories to tell, and like yourself, I'm trying to give them an avenue in which to tell those stories. And so that's where I'm at kind of now, through kind of being raised within secret societies, people call Freemasons. I've been a part of at one point in time when I was young in my life, or at least not, when I say a part of, I mean that I was in contact with it, that I was around a lot of people who were Masons and a lot of people who were initiated in those orders. I was never initiated myself. So that's kind of a different, I was very young, so it was more of a testing, feeling out process of trying to find a place to fit me into that, and that never quite worked out. That's a lot of where the Ruiner name comes from. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at now, and the alternative community, I just kind of want to share my experiences and my points of view on things. Don't ever like to be seen as any kind of an authority on anything, because my understanding of all of this is there's so much information, there's so many different variables that I don't feel anyone can really speak from a place of authority on it, that we all have a piece of the puzzle and we need to share these stories amongst ourselves in order to see the picture from a wider place. And that's what I'm trying to do, is just trying to help people have a different type of way of looking at things.
Okay, fair enough. So can you, just to kind of broach this subject, we were having, I guess, just a conversation really, and then this idea came up because we're just batting around the notion that around the internet that there seems to be a preoccupation with classifying ETs, or, you know, I mean, and I'm using ET, let me say, in a general sense, which could be anything from some, you know, from a being that is coming from underground. So we've got inner Earth civilizations, we've got interdimensionals, you know, we've got things that could be, you know, called demons, if you like, beings that don't necessarily have physical bodies that can inhabit or take over physical bodies temporarily anyway. And we've got so-called angels, who are not necessarily angels or, you know, angelic, in the sense that they're not like, you know, these little babies with wings as they're depicted. And we've got a history that involves the Anunnaki, and certainly the Illuminati coming, the link-ups between the Illuminati and the Anunnaki are pretty strong. Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. A lot of their, the various cults, the mythology of the cult, or the religion of the cult, is centered around meetings with what people call Anunnaki, which is, you know, a kind of a generalized word for various contact with aliens, or extraterrestrials, or even interterrestrials. I think one of those names that's kind of been thrown on a bunch of different beings that it may or may not apply to.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And what we can say is that there is a general term that, at least to my knowledge, comes from the Sumerian tablets, and that we're referring to that particular group that we know of as the Anunnaki, a group that Sitchin was referring to, that talks about Anu as being, you know, this father figure, and Enlil and Enki as brothers. So we're talking about that group specifically when I say Anunnaki anyway, and not just all ETs, for what it's worth. And I think that when I say that's the link up with the Illuminati that I see, and the bloodlines, and going back to Nibiru. Now there is another group of ETs that also are linked up, and maybe several actually, with the Illuminati very directly. One group that comes to mind is the ones from Aldebaran, that, and then and really. Each of these groups seems to have a fairly high level of reptilian DNA, as far as I can tell. So at any rate, do you want to talk about what you're seeing in the community, and this sort of idea that ET is going to come and save us at some point. This kind of rubs me the wrong way. I think that we were talking about this notion that happens when individuals think that our Earth is in a rather desperate straits right now, depending on your perspective. And some people feel that ET is going to come down and save them. And I think that this is really actually can be quite damaging to human beings in general to carry this notion. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I agree with you. I think that it is dangerous to kind of carry that notion. It's kind of a dangerous notion to put authority in anyone or expectation of being saved into anyone. And so, especially with ETs, because the first blog that I wrote for The Whole World Laughing was called Vastness, and the idea basically behind that was that we need to kind of expand and refocus our ideas of various races out there, because it's not as simple as Pleiadians, right? Pleiades are a star system. There's many different races that come from the Pleiadians. So even if a race were to interact with you and describe themselves as Pleiadians, you still need to expand your focus on that and see that all that means is they come from the Pleiades. That's not their name, right? If you're from, if you're in Paris, let's say we were from Paris and I'm from Canada, we're going to have a very different culture. We're going to have a slightly different view of our own world, and we live on the same planet. So imagine, you lived on Mars and I lived on Earth, and we would definitely have a very different view of things. So if I'm interacting with you and I'm saying that I come from the Milky Way, that doesn't really narrow it down enough to explain what my intentions could be and what kind of affiliations I may have with other beings who come to you and say that they're from the Milky Way or from the Pleiades or any star system like that. And so starting there and expanding there, what that means is, just as like my neighbor and I may not get along, that Pleiadian and that Pleiadians may not get along either. And so if one is coming to make contact with a human and saying something like, we're here to save you, another one may be coming to another human and saying, we're here to do something. Either one of them could be lying. So it's really not as simple as just understanding, like, they managed to get here, they've made contact with us, they're telling us one thing, they're just as capable of lying as any human, they're just as capable as being deceptive as any human. You can't assume they're not just because they seem like they're more advanced.
Absolutely.
And from there,
one thing that I also want to stress is that even the Anunnaki that are talked about, the Enki Enlil stories that are in the Sumerian tablets, regardless of who interprets them, and I do know there's a huge, group of people out there that don't believe Zecharia Sitchin's interpretation was accurate. But regardless, if you go back to the tablets themselves, you can see that there were, these individuals are not gods, and they're not God, and they're not God-like, in the sense that unless you consider gods and godlike beings to be just like humans. In other words, they have petty jealousies, they have rivalries, they go to war, they abduct, each other, they turn each other and others into slaves. So we're really talking about, when we're talking about ETs, we're talking about beings that are capable of just about anything. And deception is also one of the number one things that they're notorious to do, actually, if you follow the abduction history and the contact history out there. And just because some being tells you they're Pleiadian, a lot of these beings have the ability, if they're able to go interdimensional and so on, and to beam themselves in, so to speak, in a physical body, not necessarily just on a craft. They can be manifesting as anything you want to see. They're going to access your mind. And so that if you want to see Jesus or Mary or whoever you want to see, or you want to see a nice, tall, blonde Nordic, then a gray can do that. And you may be dealing with a gray and not know it. So I think these kinds of cautionary statements are really, really important. And I also think that in general, we have sort of right now a group of people all over the internet who are having contact, who are saying their contact is the contact, and their beings are, you know, the good beings, and they have the, you know, the best things. And I mean, it's actually, well, I find it amusing. It's, you know, it's like backing a football team or something like that. It's, you know, I just think that humans have to be really careful about this kind of just accepting what anybody says, especially in the cult of personality, where you get maybe swayed by one person's popularity and what they're saying versus another person's. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's definitely it. Is the fighting between contacts. My contact said this, my contact said that, is something that's all through this community. You know, people kind of choose sides in that way, and that division is unnecessary when you are looking at things from a bigger picture of, you know, there's 7 billion people on this planet. How many billions of people do you think are out there? And how many different messages could be coming through those billions of people that are out there? It's really not wise to say that any one is more right or more wrong than the other. Another thing to kind of touch on when we're talking about looking at it through the past is they've had the ability to rewrite things. You know, his story has been written after the fact. So names have been changed, descriptions have been changed. Even if you didn't, you know, want to be seen, you could go back in after the fact and change your image, or throw a different image over top of your actions so that those actions are associated with someone else. So it's really hard to take anything just at face value. You really have to take the biggest picture you can and really kind of let your intuition play with things. And even once you've done that, it's not a good idea to even create, this is the way that it is. These beings are absolutely good, these beings are absolutely bad, because there's such a gray area there. You can have like a species that is typically treating, or a group from a species that is typically treating humans in a very negative way, and you can have individuals within that group who don't feel the same way. I mean, listen, using the Anunnaki stories from Sitchin as the example, Enki and Enlil, you know, that's two very different approaches to what they think should happen. They're brothers. Right? So what does that tell you? If you expand that into every different type of contact experience, then you realize that there's got to be very differing opinions and everything else. And I think a lot of the problem is that assumption that because they are more advanced technologically, or they've figured out how to travel the universe better than we have, or whatever way we're looking at that, that they are, you know, morally perfect, or absolutely spiritually enlightened, or anything like that, because we can see, like, you know, we're getting close to that, or depending on who you talk to, we're capable of that ourselves. But are we perfect in those ways? Are we 100% spiritual? Are the people we're even sending out in those programs 100% spiritual? No, not all the time. So you can't assume that about them either.
Absolutely. And that is actually rather desperate. I have to say that there are a lot of people, I think, out there that are very confused. And I think one thing that you can do is over time sort of test to see if what you're getting from your so-called contact is actually playing out the way they sort of led you to believe it would. And the other thing is to take it all under advisement, perhaps. Even as some people like to tell you, is to mentor yourself to an ET, but understanding that those ETs are on a development trajectory themselves, and that they may not be as evolved as they make themselves out to be. So again, just as you're saying, that there could be a lot of deception out there. I think it's really difficult to understand that humans being made up, what I as I consider them, which, you know, and this is also, and everyone's, you know, it's a crapshoot, whatever you want to believe. But if you take on the notion that we are the descendants of various ET races, that in essence we're a mixture of 12 or more races, that we're a hybrid race, and that we're related to some more than others, etc. And that goes on an individual basis. Then you're going to resonate with certain groups, and those certain groups may indeed contact you. But understanding that those groups have rivalries, and understanding that the group contacting you may have an agenda that you're not aware of, and all of these sorts of things. And that, whoa, I don't know if you can hear that. I'm actually in Paris right now, and they just started yelling in the background. I guess that's what that is.
Somebody scored.
Yeah, it's football. Well, they call it soccer. There's a bar downstairs from this little tiny place I'm staying in. Anyway, so yeah, what would you have to say about that? This notion of people being able to discern, you know, who they're dealing with, and maybe even if you yourself have had contact, some of the ideas that you use to, you know, principles that you might use in dealing with contact.
Well, I know for myself, you know, from the first contact to multiple contacts beyond that, because I became familiar with different groups, different species. That first contact, yes, I 100% thought, like, you know, whatever they showed me, whatever they told me was, you know, very important, very real, very, what's the word? I should take it very seriously, and that they were probably right about everything that they said. But then you start talking to another species, and they deliver their message, and all of a sudden that message is different. And then you get to another one, and that message is different. And then you get to another one, and that message is different. What I had the opportunity to do was actually ask different beings the same questions, and I got back different answers. So what I determined from that is it was no different than two humans watching a car crash and coming back with their perception of what they witnessed, what they took, right, and having opinions on why the situation happened the way that it did, or what exactly played out. So when you take that into consideration again, you know, my contact with one species may tell me one thing, but another species will tell me another. And all I can really do is hold them both as possibilities. I can't say, well, that one's right, that one's wrong, because there's times where that one's right and that one's wrong. So you can't, the idea of putting any one person's word or any one group's word or anyone's word or any one way of viewing the universe on an absolute pedestal and saying that is absolutely the way it is. We're here perceiving, observing the universe, and therefore we have levels of perception that change what is actually going on in the universe and how we take that all in. And with that understanding, you have to use that as part of your discernment. You have to understand that the facts that someone is giving you are their perception of something that occurred. It's not a Polaroid picture. It's not an exact copy of the situation. And you definitely have to question it. Questioning everything all the time, never really holding anything as an absolute fact in your mind, is what I believe is discernment. It's always being open to being wrong, always being open to new ideas that may present new questions. That is, I don't see discernment as a knife that cuts information in half. I see it as a sphere that you hold it in and consider it with.
Fair enough. There's also this notion that that what ETs are telling people is going through a filter. In other words, the human being that is relating the so-called information they think they're getting, and albeit, again, that the ET they think is an ET may actually be a completely different race than the one they think they're seeing, because the ET is accessing perhaps their mind and their wishes and their hopes and their dreams for humanity. And that ET may have their own agenda that says, well, this person wants to see a Nordic, I'm going to be a Nordic and see if I can influence them, wow them, etc. And so what you're getting, even as the audience out there, is it's coming through a human filter, and that individual has their own hopes and dreams. And so I just want to say that it's really important when you're listening to somebody tell you about their interaction with ETs, and that they were taken up in a craft, and they were taken to a meeting, and the meeting, you know, and there's lots of people that are saying this type of thing. So of course, I'm Camelot now. I get told maybe more than most people, the whole huge gamut out there, but it's enough to know that we're in contact. And I think it's also important to know that people are not just in contact because they're in this community and they have a fascination. In other words, anyone, every human being is, whether they know it or not, is, as far as I'm concerned, in contact, because we're in this multiverse together with all these different consciousnesses and beings, et cetera, just like you are in the world with all the plants and animals, and each of those have consciousness. And yes, there are hive minds within that. So keep that in mind. So if you are dealing with an ET from a various race, that race may have a certain kind of hive mind, but it may also have a very set agenda. And understanding that ETs have lots of agendas, and that, again, as you're saying, the idea that they're, just because they have high technology doesn't mean they're evolved spiritually at all. In fact, to the contrary, all you have to do is look at our secret space program and the Nazis, where a lot of it came out of the Nazi generation, and you can see that their agendas are rather diabolical, and yet their science may be very good. So it's this kind of dichotomy that we're dealing with, which is just crazy. And this also goes for dealing with so-called Illuminati bloodlines and the good and bad within that. Maybe you want to address that a little bit, Shane.
Sorry, you cut out just on me just at the last minute there, so I actually missed the question.
Oh, okay. I was just saying how the Illuminati bloodlines have both positive and negative beings within them, and individuals that are trying to do, even some that are trying to break away and that are fighting the good fight, what we might call a white hat Illuminati. You might want to talk about that both from the point of view of an ET as well as an Illuminati. And a lot of Illuminati on the higher levels consider themselves ETs anyway, don't they?
Yes, it's true. And within any secret society, any one secret society, you're going to have the same thing. Every member has different opinions. They do seem to work towards a unified goal, but that doesn't mean that they agree with each other on everything, or that they even follow the same spiritual beliefs or practice their spiritual beliefs in the world in the same way. What I mean by that is that it doesn't necessarily, just because they have the spiritual belief doesn't mean that they actually act as if they have the spiritual belief, or that they, kind of like the common criticism of Christians. I apologize there.
That's okay.
Where they're not necessarily. Sorry, I don't know if you can see everything okay?
Yeah, we just lost your picture there.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to lower my resolution here and see if it helps. Okay.
With my phone and the battery here. Just 1 second. Talk through it. They can have different overall beliefs on just about little technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you can take two Masons, they're not going to agree on everything. You can take two Illuminati people, they're not going to agree on everything within any one group. They all have these terms of what they're doing and whether or not that's right or wrong, right? A lot of people within what people call the Illuminati do believe what they're doing is altruistic or benefit in the long run. They see the ends as justifying the means, and some of the bad things that they do and in their mind anyways. So even with that in mind, if a person has that belief where, I need to achieve this, and in order to achieve this, and this is bad, but I've got to do it in order to achieve that, that intention in and of itself is kind of gray, right? It's not a clear-cut benevolent or malevolent intention. It's, you know, it's based on a belief. It's, they think that they're going to achieve something if they do it, and that's what drove them to do it. So expand that to an extraterrestrial, they're going to have the same thing. I mean, even like the story of the and take different species and creating a new species, you know, who said that they could do that? You know, like that's a questionable action in and of itself. Take a contactee who has been given a message to deliver to humanity. Well, why don't you just deliver it yourself? You know, like, why are you trying to pass it through a human filter? That action in and of itself needs to be questioned. So I think that any way you cut it, if you're not questioning what the motive is, and you know, that question of why not do this instead of that, you're really just kind of opening yourself up for the potential to manipulate it, because you understand someone's intentions, right? And really, you've got to question someone who is asking you to do something for them to begin with, right? Like if I came to you and went and said, can you go tell so-and-so this so that I don't have to do it? Wouldn't you wonder why I wouldn't just do it myself? It's a pretty standard question. And going back to the Illuminati, there's different cults within it and different programs within it, and the belief structure of all of these things are different. That's called compartmentalization. That's how you keep things secret, that's how you keep things separate, and that's how you keep things occulted, right? Because if you give one group too much information, then if you end up with a whistleblower from that group, they've got all the pieces for the puzzle. That's not what you want, so you scatter them all over the place. And so if person from program A comes up to program B and they start to talking, they're going to have different stories of, you know, who the Anunnaki are, who the Draco are, who the Aldebaran are, who the Arcturians are, who the Avians are, who anyone is. And that's because you're dealing with something that is just way too vast. It's, you can't put like I keep referring to just looking at our own culture and the difference between us. Yes, there's hive minds out there. Norm, you know, that's not that's not, you know, 9 out of 10 species out there. That's maybe 3 out of 10 species out there. So, and even with a hive mind, that doesn't mean that the individual within the hive mind isn't going to present something to you that's different than what the hive actually believes as well, right?
Well, you can also have, well, you can have
so many layers.
Rogue groups within hive minds. From what I understand, you can have rogue groups that break away and break away in a positive way. And sometimes the hive will have made a positive decision, let's say, on behalf of humanity, and the rogue group can actually counter that. For example,
Yep.
The abduction.
Same tactics we see here.
The abductions, a lot of the more negative side of the abductions, it has been said, are done by a rogue group of greys and reptilians that are still out there kind of operating on their own, when their own group has actually signed treaties, according to several of our whistleblowers, and broken those treaties, had those treaties broken by rogue groups of their own group, in other words. So who are you dealing with, actually? This is the question. I also wanted to talk about the notion of being saved. You know, this whole idea of ET saving us. And I wanted to go back to the time of Atlantis, because as far as I'm concerned, everything I've read and everything I've intuited and you know, sort of been able to remote view myself about Atlantis, that civilization was attacked. There were wars going on, and there was also some very devious, dark things going on the planet within the so-called civilization of Atlantis, which apparently was practically the whole Earth, although there was one or two major islands, what we call large land masses, that comprised the original Atlantis at any rate. You know, that was sunk into the sea. I find it fascinating, people that think that they're going to be saved by ET, and just wondering, what do you think happened to the humans that were on that planet? I mean, on this planet when that happened. In other words, did the good ETs just not sign up and do anything, or did they come and, you know, rescue the people? Because we have all kinds of stories that have come down through time about, you know, humans that have died in mass in that situation. So if you're waiting around for ET to save you, I don't know. I think you should need to take these things into, you know, consideration. And what is being saved anyway? Because you're really talking about saving your physical body, and ETs have a different view of the physical vehicle. And this is something that we should discuss as well. So what are your thoughts on that? Hello?
Hi there. It's very broken up on my end. I'm not sure what you just finished on. Sorry.
Oh, okay. You heard me talk about Atlantis, though, right?
Yes, yes.
And I was also talking about ETs and the fact that being saved by an ET is about saving your physical body, and that a lot of ET races don't view the physical body as something even worth saving. So you need to kind of rethink that. What is the notion of being so-called saved when you're extremely materialistically thinking they're going to save your material body?
Yeah, various actions that one might take that they think are helpful, unintended negative consequences. There is a split in various species I've met between whether or not the soul is important and whether or not the physical being, the genetics, are important. And when you're dealing with different ET races, that's a good place to start, is, you know, what their view on the soul is and what their view on genetics are, because that'll kind of show you what their thought process is in terms of what they think is right and wrong and what they think is beneficial for any other species or you moving. And so, you know, we look at GMO food, and you can take the mainstream explanation for GMO food and you can listen to that. You could say, okay, that's a good idea. But when you see the other layers of it, you realize, okay, that's a bad idea, right? But if you were only ever layer, that's the idea. Yeah, we need more food. Let's create more food, right? Not realizing that, you know, maybe taking in unstable genetics from genetically modified food might have a negative long-term effect on your physical body. Right? It seems like a good thing in the interim. Take that onto a bigger level, and you have, let's just say, you know, your city is in a really bad spot, and someone steps in and they're like, well, if you do this, 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 and this, all of those problems that you're complaining about right now will be saved. In the long term, you're going to lose that, and that. Let's not talk about that right now. Let's just focus on what we're here to get. And, you know, by the time you save you from, you realize that maybe they've created something else, different type of saving from. So maybe instead of allowing someone to come in and save you from something, maybe you should be looking at how to do it for yourself. Like, say, as a species, our goal should be coming together as our species, humanity, and figuring out solutions so that we can save ourselves, instead of putting the focus out there on, well, if so-and-so came down here and landed on the White House lawn, then we could all be free from that, or we could all be free from this, and we could have, you know, whatever technology for this or that. Maybe we should focus on, well, what can we do as the human species to start fixing these problems? How can we adjust our lives? How can we bring out technology that we're already capable of and we've already figured out to do this, instead of just, hey, they can do it, let's call on them, let's get them in here, because you never know. You just, Atlantis is a really good example of someone coming in and doing something that they thought was helping, but really, if they had just left us alone, we probably would have been a lot better off.
Yeah, I mean, I did. That's a great point, and I did want to bring that up and have us talk about that, which is you know, exactly what does intervention mean, and what is better for you as a species, and who's going to make that decision. And right now, the secret space program, for example, and the Illuminati are making that decision for you as humans. And that's really important to be aware of. And so now you want to go out and you want to think that, I call it the daddy syndrome. There's an extremely paternalistic view, even in the secret space program, Illuminati and all of that, that they're talking about they're going to tell us what's right for us, what's going to improve our lives, what's going to make us a better, you know, soul, or improve the earth, or this or that. And who are they to know? In other words, they're making your decisions for you, just like governments. So this paternalistic view of reality that we've been put into and actually bought into and continue to buy into has to be questioned, as far as I'm concerned, on a very deep level. And so if you're looking for a daddy to come save you, you know, a race of daddies, you know, first you're looking at your government to tell you that ET is real. Even that is a problem, in my view, because if you're looking for someone else to tell you what your reality is, already we've got a problem. It's really, it just has to come back to humans, because it's just like as above, so below. And you're using that principle, I can see in your answers to me, you know, and what you're talking about a lot, the notion that, you know, think of a parent with a child. You cannot walk for that child. You know, the child will not develop the necessary muscles and intelligence and so on and so forth to do it themselves. They will not progress. It's that simple. So the very wise ETs, the ones that really truly are service to others, will understand this, and therefore they will intervene a whole lot less than others. So, and Shane, if you're having trouble, you know, with breakup, you can always turn your video off and go just to audio. That will also help the connection. So just keep an eye on that. But what do you have to say to all that? Hello?
I'll give that a try. I don't know if I'm breaking up on your end, but you're breaking up a lot on my end.
Okay. Yeah. At the moment, sometimes when you're talking, you are breaking up. I'm not sure what the audience is hearing, and that's kind of a problem. There's not really any way for me to determine that at this moment because of my limited resources. But go ahead, and we'll give it a shot.
Okay. So I can just refresh my mind on where you ended there.
Okay, so I basically was talking about how, you know, the parent-child, as above, so below, that relationship, and how you're using that in a lot of the things that you're actually talking to, you know, and replying about in this situation that we're discussing, and just how important it is to understand that, you know, as above, so below, and if the ET is gonna, you know, fix everything for you. Any ET race that tells you they're going to fix everything is, as far as I'm concerned, a service to service to self group. They have an agenda, and they're not actually here. They're going to be making decisions for you, and you're back into a paternalistic system, you know, of daddy taking care of you and telling you what's right and what's wrong. So that was what I was talking about.
Yeah, but it's that need that we've developed for authority. It always comes back to that, really. We don't need our government to give us disclosure because we know, like, if you've had experiences, then you know. If you've done the research, then you know. Like, the information is out there. All they can really do is put the stamp of approval on it, right? And we don't need that because, you know, we don't need daddy to come along and tell us what's right and wrong. We should be able to start figuring this out for ourselves. And if we can't, then that is where we need to start. We need to do whatever it is within ourselves to figure out how to be able to look after ourselves without daddy, without the parent there. Looking at that dynamic as above, so below, parents, like, we lie to our children, right? We create fantasies for our children. Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, you know, if an ET race is coming along and treating you like a child, then they're probably going to lie to you, and they're probably going to create some fantasies for you in order to get you to do what they want you to do, or make you believe what they want you to believe. I agree that the wisest races out there would not intervene unless absolutely necessary. I personally would not intervene in a situation unless not absolutely necessary, sorry. So I would imagine that as above, so below. Others with a wide perspective would also not intervene unless absolutely necessary. And then if they do intervene, I would hope that they're going to do it responsibly and not just do it because they think that it's the right thing to do. Because, I mean, I may think that it's the right thing to do to, like, say some species of animal where if, you know, they fell out of their nest or they got separated from their mom, and if you returned them to the mother wouldn't take them back and they would abandon them, and or, you know, even further, some animals would actually kill the young because they, at least some people believe this. It may or may not be true. Anyways, as an example, you don't know the consequences of the action, so you probably shouldn't take the action. And any species or race of ET that were to come here and create an action that, you know, doesn't necessarily fit with where the species they're dealing with it is at, like, say, introducing technology to a species that has no idea what technology is and is still trying to develop how to deal with themselves within nature, technology, and take away all the lessons that they would have developed had they have been given the time to learn how to fit themselves into nature, right? You're taking experiences away from the species, you're taking evolution away from the species, and assuming that you know what's right better than nature or better than they do. And that type of action is not a service to others. Action, even though you may think that what you're doing is service to others, really you're serving yourself and your own ideals of what you believe that should be, what you believe that race should be. So yeah, if any species were to come to me and say, hey, like, we're going to change this about your planet because we think that this is what you need to do, I would say, well, isn't that up to us? Shouldn't you present that to us as an option that we could possibly take? And even presenting something of an option, do we get all the information involved? Or are you only going to tell us half the story, and we're going to act on half of the story, and then 50 years down the road realize, there was a whole other layer to that story that we didn't know, and now we're in all kinds of trouble because we weren't paying attention.
Absolutely. And are you familiar with, Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's End, which is a great cautionary tale in this regard, because Arthur C. Clarke is, we were told by certain whistleblowers, more than one, was very read into the secret space program, as several sci-fi authors have been, actually, and Mark Richards also talks about that. And so as it happens, he wrote Childhood's End, which is all about a group of ETs that come to Earth and just tell the humans they're going to get rid of war. And as long as the humans want them to do that, and the humans agree, and pretty soon, well, I don't want to give the story away if you haven't seen it, or read it, but it's absolutely, required reading as far as I'm concerned. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, it was a long time ago that I read it, but definitely familiar with that, and even just that concept, we see it in other things as well, where what's presented from day one doesn't end up being, the end result. Like even the TV series V, that species came down, gave us everything that we wanted, and then we ended up finding out after the fact that they did it so that they could eat us and take over our planet, right? So, I mean, we have been the idea has been put out there, and it's a good thing because it is something you need to consider. Clothing exists. We know it in our human society, and it exists out there too. And even our authorities, the people that we've put in charge of our planet, are capable of being deceived by them.
Oh, that's actually, well, that kind of should be highlighted in spades. We are talking about deals being made and having been made with various ET races, some of whom certainly did not have our best interests in mind and were deceiving the humans from the get-go. Some of the secret space programs seem to be getting wise to that and trying to turn that around now that they've gotten the technology where they think they can kind of meet mano to mano. The way the military kind of mindset is. But, you're aware of that, I'm sure. And in other words, that basically humans were being traded for technology, literally. So this is something that's come down through many whistleblowers. So here's ET, here's, highly developed technological species, and yet they're, well, their moral value is that humans are good slaves. They're good for genetic engineering, and they're also good to be eaten. So this is what they do. And even now we're having a sort of a switch up going on with our secret space program and the various ETs that are aligned with our military, some in a positive way and some with an ulterior motive. This is actually the state of the planet at this time. So what do you have to say about that?
I think we're in a time where, as a species, we're at, say, like a pinnacle of our evolution in terms of we're about to start changing or growing. And I think that some people, some species or some groups out there may have a vested interest in what direction that growing takes. And I think that irrespective of what direction it takes, it is taking us into a direction where not only are we questioning what's outside of this planet and starting to get some information that may have been occulted from us back to the public, into the public consciousness anyways, in terms of all of that, but that's going to accelerate, and we're going to have a really large dump of technologies that are going to make us question and hopefully make us question where it all came from and why it's all being dumped on us so fast. And I think the end result of that is going to be something where someone is going to try and spin it into a direction that shapes the way that we think about it in terms of how we accept it.
Well, surveillance technology is a good case in point. A lot of the surveillance technology and also the AI side of it has come from the ETs. Again, this comes from my whistleblower testimony. And that was sold to Earth as a good thing, so-called good thing for the Illuminati and for the individuals, the humans that prefer to try to rule the world, using technology to control the rest of humanity. So that was sold as a good thing. And in essence, everything's been turned against us, so that we see satellite technology, we see wireless, we see every form of technology out there that's used for surveillance is now being used to surveil us. And if they're surveilling ET with it, they're not telling us about it.
Definitely not telling us about it. There's a lot of things that are not telling us about, that just being one of them. Besides surveillance, there's other effects of the technology that we may not have considered. I mean, there's a lot of information that comes out about, say, smart meter technology and the physiological effects that one can have being like exposed to that, or even just Wi-Fi signals and the various effects that we're having from that, be it cognitive, be it physical, and how those different frequencies can also be manipulated in order to cause certain effects in us. I mean, the patents are out there on the internet for people to look at television sets and how that's all worked and how they've used that to their advantage.
Right.
Wi-Fi technology is kind of an advancement on via, and that's kind of where I think you're going with it, is that a lot of these things have been sold to us as ways to make our lives easier, but they can also be used to make our lives more controlled, right? And they definitely have steered us over, the last couple thousand years away from anything that's kind of nature-based and comes from your soul towards something that's technological and comes from a machine or comes from something material that, if you have such and such a device, it'll help you, create an OB or have psychic intuition. Whereas if you tune into your own vibration and your own soul, you can also achieve those same things. And it's just been interesting to see the push from one to the other, and not only just occulting the natural knowledge of say how to achieve telepathy or how to create an out-of-body experience into the technological, but occulting all of that information and almost making it appear as crazy talk. But yes, it's crazy that two human minds would be able to perceive the same thing in a telepathic sense. But at the same time, here's a microchip we can install into your brain, which will send a Wi-Fi signal over to your partner, and then you can get telepathy with them, right? So you've got to ask yourself, why the agenda there? If we have natural abilities that are being occulted and being replaced with technology, why would someone do that? Why wouldn't you want to enhance the natural abilities and then use technology as a crutch? Well, if you make technology the be-all and end-all, you control the on and off switch, you control the radio station, so to speak, to see what's broadcast on whatever channel. You have control over whoever you're giving that technology to. And when you're dealing with technology in that regard, you can have control over people in ways that they don't even know. Right? Like we've all talked about it, like voice to skull technology, as they call it, or voice of God technology.
Right.
Things like that can influence a person's thought patterns. Even just what I brought up with the television and how, that can help hypnotize a being, which then puts them into a very suggestible state, which allows mind control, allows influence from outside. So, all you're doing with technology is really expanding all of those possibilities on both sides. Yes, the positive side is, it can make a lot of things a lot easier, but the negative side is someone's controlling it, right? Like it's not open source to us. It's like Microsoft, where you can't necessarily just create all your own softwares unless you move on to Linux, or Mac, where you have to buy an Apple approved product in order to have compatibility. That's kind of where we go when we start getting into technology over more natural abilities. And I would say that it should be pretty obvious that those species who have interacted with our world government and have given us those technologies and have boosted up our secret space program have done so in a way that they feel they can control.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking, this is where I call robotic Superman versus angelic human. The notion that they're trying to reinvent the wheel, create a being that has, like a super soldier or whatever, who has enhanced physicality, et cetera, when in reality, we are the X-Men in essence, and we have special abilities. And it's not just the so-called new children that have these abilities. We have that. It's part of this human vehicle. It's part of our capabilities, but we have not tapped into it. And it's also very interesting to note that focusing the mind on getting these abilities and getting things outside oneself, it actually is a distraction from empowering you to go inside and get these abilities on your own and from a higher source, or from developing your own abilities. So this is, it's like a movement away from a spirituality into a mechanistic kind of view of humanity and then of course that there's always a, it's like giving, it's a bait and switch. They give you the technology, but then they can control you and have the turn on and off switch for you. And, they give you wonderful things like TV and you can watch football, and and all your creativity and aggression is getting channeled into this television, while in the meanwhile people are starving, children are dying and being abducted daily off the planet, and so on and so forth, and you're just none the wiser because you're so busy watching football or soccer or whatever it happens to be that you're watching on that technological device.
Yeah, it's taking the imagination away. The two main components behind magic being imagination and will force. They're taking the imagination away, and they've done this through various means. I mean, if you go back from the difference between reading a book and watching a movie, right? If you read about the main character of the book, you have to paint the image of what that character looks like in your own mind. You have to use your imagination to create what that character looks like. When you watch the movie, it's right there on the screen for you. There's no imagination involved. You don't have to dream it up. You can just, there you go. This is what so-and-so looks like. Take that a little bit further and take away the knowledge that the human soul has magical properties, but actually occult and make it a joke, like actually bastardize anyone who does, between witch burnings and I mean, we could go on and on and on about the various ways that they've done this over a few thousand years now, but they've taken away everything that is powerful within you and replaced it with a power from outside by technology. Yeah. I mean, it's even in our community where some people are saying now, there's no such thing as telepathy. What it is electronical grid that allows people to use mental Wi-Fi. And if you have this chip in your brain, then you can communicate with other people who have also chip in their brain, because like technology makes that possible. But there's no such thing as natural telepathy. The idea that you could possibly send a message to your partner from across the planet is ridiculous, right? Like it's not just in our mainstream science, it even comes out in our own community. And that could be that could be outside influence again from the from our controllers messing with our community, sure, but it's out there. And I think that a lot of that just comes down to doing all the work that takes to require those natural abilities. It's a challenge, it's something that takes time, it's something that takes work, where flipping a switch, getting an operation to have a chip installed in my brain really doesn't take much effort on my part. It's right there, nice and easy. So I think that if we want to reel this all the way back to the time of Atlantis, and I mean, a lot of people consider that kind of a time of the fall of man, where we did kind of take technology over nature, and we did kind of choose the easy path over the more difficult path, or the light side over the dark side, or the dark side over the light side, I guess, because even in the Star Wars mythology they say the same thing. The path to the dark side is quicker and powerful, but it also leads to fear and anger and all these other things. But it's easy, and so it seems like the best option to some. And I think that that's kind of been a sickness that we've taken on for a really long time, where we choose that easier path, and technology is the new version of that, because there's really nothing wrong with technology. My own personal opinion on it is just, we need to remember the let's call it natural technologies that we all possess as individual beings, that our Creator bestowed on us in order to experience this physical reality. The power of your soul, the power that you as a being possess, it actually goes beyond what a lot of our technology is capable of. And the only downside is, if you become powerful in that way, then you're not controllable, and you're not easily manipulated, and you can't be used as food in some sense by another species.
Absolutely. And also having to do with keeping the vibration of humanity down. There's a lot of evidence that what they're really trying to do is to dumb humanity down. We still have that dichotomy between what is in essence, talked about with Enki and Enlil, where the one wanted to keep humanity controllable, and the other was interested in actually making that being their equal in essence, and allowing for more rebellious sort of point of view and so on. So we still have that going on today, and it's really important, as I say, to have that rebel gene to allow you to basically rebel under any and all circumstances, and not to just take the information that you're being given and just swallow it whole. And I saw a poster on a billboard recently. It says, it had some girl with, I don't know, she had a Walkman or whatever she had, and it was like, "I love technology." That was the poster. And a new god or icon for you, which is basically technology. That's the new god or icon, and that's what they want you to believe, because it facilitates their agenda for you to do that. Also, the notion of cell phones, I guess you have heard that the technology of cell phones could have been really positive for us instead of cancer producing, etc. But they chose the one that was actually gonna harm humans, and now they're seeing the results of that more and more. So this is the kind of thing that we're talking about, is even technology itself. What kind of technology, and is it used for the betterment of humanity really in the long run, taking the long view, or is it something that's going to harm them? And so it's how it's used. I have a tendency to say that anything can be used as a tool. It's how you use it. And is it running you, or are you running it? It's like when somebody buys a new car and they're constantly, washing it and worrying about it and whether it might get a dent or what. In essence, you're serving the car. The car's not serving you. So it's a really interesting dichotomy that happens.
It's true, and if you take that back to working on the natural technology that exists within your soul first, then the working on that is always working on you, right? And I'm a firm believer that the more work we do on ourselves, the more benefit we are to others. And so service to self in the sense that you're trying to improve yourself is in part service to others as well. I like to say that pretty much everything that we're seeing out there is a projection of something that's within ourselves, and if we really want to fix it, then we need to find it within ourselves and fix it within ourselves first, before we can really, say, combat it out there in the rest of the world. It's kind of like the idea of if you're going to go out and speak about something, then you probably want to research the topic quite well so you have a full understanding of it before you go out there and start making Facebook posts about vaccines are bad, but I don't know why. That kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's also, but it's, to get back to the topic at hand, so to speak, this idea that of gods and demons and angels and so on. We know that in the paintings, if you look at old paintings, I go to art galleries quite often, and these amazing paintings, and you can see that they were painting, gods and angels coming down to rescue man. This whole kind of, again, paternalistic view of how that the ET is being manifested, or being even, conceived as a savior type of individual. And the bottom line is, is understanding that that's a dependency. We're talking about a dependency syndrome going on there.
It's true. A new movie just came out. Obviously, we all know how a lot of these topics get played out in movies. Superman, or Batman versus Superman. I don't remember which order that goes. But within that movie, a lot of these topics come up. You've got Batman, who is a human being in a suit, and you've got Superman, who is an ET from another planet with godlike abilities. And there's lines thrown around that in the movie, like this is a battle between man versus God. And one very poignant scene, Lex Luthor's character is showing a painting, and the woman points out that the painting is flipped upside down, and what the painting is supposed to be is humanity on the surface of the planet and demons coming up found, right? Like the idea of hell being below us and demons coming from hell. And he's flipped it up, and his explanation is because we all know that demons don't come from below us; they come from the sky. So, that's that same idea that, angels, it's a perception. Demons, it's a perception. Some schools of thought are that there's no ETs and it's all just angels and demons. Some people think that there's no angels and demons and there's just ETs. Maybe there's both, right? Or maybe, like you said right off the top, maybe it's all of the above.
Right.
And this is where we kind of need to, instead of trying to reduce everything down to it's this or it's that, maybe it's time to expand that view and realize that there's probably a vast amount of possibilities out there, and every possibility out there would have to be treated differently, right? If you think of the human race being approached by two species, some other planets simultaneously, and inviting them both to live on the planet with us, that's no different than what we see right now as something like immigration, right? All of a sudden you've got different races and different religions and whatnot interacting with communities who maybe have never been exposed to that before, and there's some growing, there's some learning to get along that is involved in that. I mean, it's, as above, so below. Let's just look at what's going on in this world in terms of racism and the various agendas that they're pushing in that way. If we're fighting amongst ourselves and they can manipulate us enough to fight amongst ourselves in that way, the manipulation and that possibility still is there, and actually just gets bigger and larger when you start introducing, hey, we're interacting with 5 different races of ETs and they've been giving us technology for the last few years, and now we want to introduce them to you. Well, first of all, why haven't you been telling us this whole time? Secondly, who are these beings? Where do they come from? What do they want? And what do they give you? What did you give them? There's a whole can of worms that starts opening up and unraveling there. So, yeah, it's a big question. Angels, demons, gods, no, they're beings just like us, and we have to learn how to interact with them, just like we need to learn how to interact with each other. And
well, it's also worth bringing up the notion of superpowers, because ETs, a lot of ETs wow people because they supposedly, can do things like materialize or dematerialize. Now, actually, if you do time travel, then you're able to do the same thing. And if you go to sleep at night and you time travel anyway, and you go out of your body, you're doing the same thing anyway. But aside from that, if you're really impressed by the powers, so-called powers of ETs, then you have to look at that and decide whether those powers actually mean that that's an enlightened being, and what does that mean to you? And what are they trying to convey with you? What are they doing here? Why are they talking to you to begin with? This kind of thing. So it's again, this idea that behind the technology, behind the so-called superpowers, what does that indicate? That we have a very high enlightened being or not? And so it's really important, I think, that people start being very critical, thinking critically about this subject, what we call ETs, and not become blind followers. I guess that's the sort of message, at least, that I'm hoping we can convey here, and become critical also, sorry to say, of each other and of our own, of the stories out there, the stories that are being put out there, and start to really try to have your own experiences, understanding that no one's a special contactee. That's a huge problem as well. This kind of cult of personality of contactees, where certain people, because they say they're being taken off planet, as if other people aren't being taken off planet, it's like celebrity or something. This is just complete nonsense, and you really have to be on the lookout for that kind of thing. So do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. It's definitely a problem. I witnessed it myself. just, after doing my first interview with you, there were certain people who started approaching me as if I was that type of person, to be put up on a pedestal, or to be not worshipped, but to be looked up to in that way. And I've tried to do my best to explain to everyone I come in contact with that I'm no different than you are, and that you have experiences that I don't have, that give you knowledge or insights that I don't have. And the same is true for all of us, every one of us. I mean, you can take my accounts and someone else's accounts, and there's differences there, and that's because we've experienced different things. And what I experienced is no more or less valid than what any of them did, but it's also no more or less valid than anyone who's listened to me, right? Like my podcast, I try to bring people who've never spoken publicly before forward, and they're telling, just as great stories as I have had. They have just as great insight as I have, based on their own experiences. So it really, and I mean, we do it in everything. I mean, I also sing for bands, and I get it that way, where I'll have people come up to me and look at me like I'm to be put on a pedestal for something big. Or the same way we approach celebrities. So, oh my God, like I work all around a lot of celebrities, so I see it a lot of the time where people are just like, oh my God, that's so and so. Oh my God, that's so and so. But I've also got to know enough of them well enough to know that they are still just people. They're just as flawed as you and me, and they're just as flawed as we all are collectively. And it's true for every other species I've met, of ETs as well, that they don't deserve the pedestal any more than I do, or that you do, or that anyone listening to us does. We're, we throw that phrase around, we're all one, but I think it's more that we're all equally capable of learning how to interact with this holographic reality. And I think that's the first place that you can start to call a red flag, is when you see these contacts, whether it's the ET or the channel that they're coming through, trying to cause some type of division of this side is right, this side is wrong, and I know everything, right? And that should be at least a big red flag, because it's something I've said recently, is if you know what you say you know, then you know that that's not true. It's that, it goes back to that phrase, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know much at all, and for me personally, that's every step of the way. The more I've learned, that has been my realization, is that, well, wow, if that's true, and 2 days ago I couldn't even conceive of that being true, then what else could be true, right? And where's my place in that? But I think at the end of the day, this is the biggest message I think that I would like to get through to people, is that none of us deserve to be on any type of pedestal, and nobody deserves to be on any type of pedestal above you. For every one thing that whoever it is you're looking up to can do that you can't do, there's something else that you can do that they can't do, which doesn't make them any better or worse than you. It makes them equal to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this actually, at least for my own purposes and understanding, has also to do with what is in essence Christ consciousness, and understanding that we don't need an avatar to come to to the world again and save anyone. That actually we all contain Christ consciousness. We are all Christ in training, if you want to look at it like that. And understanding also, if time and space are illusions, and that this is an illusion, and we are all sparks of the one, we are all one, then in essence, we are all Christ, and we are all, you understand where I'm going with this. In other words, understanding that you cannot give lip service to certain things and say, well, God is over there, but he's not over there, type of thing. And even thinking of God as a he or a she can have huge pitfalls in my opinion. So it's this notion of putting anything sort of above you is actually a deception, because if we truly are all one, and then we are truly all that essence, if you understand. So it's all, there's a majesty in life. In other words, there are things that you can revere, but they don't have to be embodied in individual manifestations that are temporary. So it's great to admire people and things and places and all of this, but I think it's really important to keep a perspective. And I just, I think it's dangerous what's going on out in the community surrounding the whole notion of ETs and what may also come as the result of so-called disclosure, because sorry to say that they've been lying to you all these years. Do you think that they're going to tell you the truth, the real truth about disclosure? Even if they disclose, I mean, these people that are so obsessed with this, please, you know, these people will never tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It's just not going to happen. It's never happened in the history of the world. So they have an agenda. Understand that. So if they disclose ETs to you, they're going to be selective. They're going to give it spin. And it's time to grow up. Humanity has to really grow up, and they're going to have to grow up really fast, I think, because we're entering this galactic space age world. And it doesn't appear that a lot of people are ready for it. Because they're still getting caught up in these old-fashioned notions of worshiping, you know, and the whole fan syndrome is really, you know, very dangerous. It's a dangerous mentality to put yourself into. So yeah, I mean, I second that notion for sure.
I definitely understand being grateful to the channels who have maybe opened your eyes to a new idea. But, you know, they didn't invent whatever information that they came up with, right? They had it bestowed upon them, or someone brought it to their attention as well. So there's no real difference other than they learned about it first and were able to talk to you about it, right? So, yeah, overall, I mean, even just like, say, whistleblowers or contactees, we really need to be questioned, myself included. After I did this interview, a friend of mine, I'm going to give him a little shout out, I hope you don't mind, she's a CW chanter, ripped that apart. And, you know, I don't agree, obviously, with all of his conclusions, but it's a form of questioning that I believe is important. You can't just take something at face value because so-and-so said it. It must be true. You have to actually look at it and say, well, this is what they said. That doesn't make sense, you know, or that can't be true because of this. And that's very, very healthy. And that's kind of what I think that we need to do more of, not just with other people in a judgment sense, but start with yourself. Like, really look at, you know, the information that you're running around with in your mind, and question where that's come from and what motives those who've given it to you might have, and what projections you may be putting onto it when you tell it to others, and then, you know, expand that out to everyone else. When I tell you something that I've experienced, question it, run it through all your discernment filters. Don't just, oh, Shane the Ruiner's a really nice guy, so he must be telling me the absolute truth, and because he says that it's true, it must be absolutely true, or because he believes it's true, it must be absolutely true, so that means it's true. That's not true. I mean, I say it all the time that, you know, it's what I believe, but it may not be true. It's what I experienced, but it may not have been real. It's what I've been told, but that may have been a lie. So all I can do is the same thing all you can do, which is take all the information you can, run it through your trivium method, and do your best to try and put the pieces together. The only real danger is when you start becoming absolute on things and using that absolute conviction to separate yourselves from anything else that may present a new idea.
Yeah, for sure. It is really important. It's also worth noting, and I think we were talking about this early on, but keep in mind the immensity of the multiverse. You know, the universe is out there, the solar system's out there, the number of, well, they've even discovered, scientists, I think even in the mainstream now, will tell you that there's, you know, hundreds of thousands of Earth-like planets. the conception of also human life or life, and deciding that only humans can, can go back to God. Well, I thought that God was everything. You know what I'm saying? Are you just actually saying that certain beings don't have the ticket in because they aren't human? There's a lot of religions that want to tell you that. You got to question that, and plants and animals and all, you can look at dolphins. Dolphins are not, dolphins are ETs in essence. They just had an article out recently that said octopus don't have, Earth-based DNA or whatever. Yeah, hello. So, in other words, these are beings. These are life forms, and life itself, the essence of life, comes from source. And so, whatever you conceive that source to be, it's important to kind of understanding that. There's also this interesting thing that's going on that I wanted to talk about a little, which has to do with various ET races supposedly piggybacking on humans in order to get sort of souls or develop souls in order to then go back on their trajectory to reunite with the oneness. So I think you've heard of this lately, and I know I have. For example, there are various people out there talking about praying mantis supposedly want to piggyback with us. The raptors, according to Mark Richards, want to do that. It's, that's an interesting, dichotomy right there that we're talking about. Is that really what's going on? Or is that what they think they're doing? Or is that another form of vampirism? Or, in other words, not only do we need to kind of create our own way and have sovereignty, but it's also worth looking at, do we want a parasitical species to figure they're going to make it their way back to source by feeding off of us? Now, there can be a more positive sort of side to that, which has to do with, which is the one that's talked about, at least as far as the raptors, is that they have decided to align themselves with us in a positive way, stop eating us, for example, and that will actually be more positive for their own race's trajectory. So, it's an interesting topic and worth, I think, taking a look at. Have you come across that topic, Shane, in your own, sort of travels? And you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Species that kind of.
Sorry, here, I got to cut 1 second. Species that kind of come forward as here to deliver a message or here to give us a new idea. And then you find out a little bit later that the reason why they're doing that is they can't move forward unless we do. So that should make you ask the question, well, why? What is it that ties you to us, and what may have happened that ties our future to yours, or where's that interaction, the why? And yeah, you do see that quite frequently with various contactees, especially some rather popular ones tend to go that direction. And I do think that that's a big why. Why? What is it? I see it the same as saying, I would do this, but I can't because of that. It's almost like you're making an excuse, right? And what's causing you to make an excuse? You feel inadequate. Why do you feel inadequate? Could be a multitude of reasons, but these are the kind of train of questions that you'd have to ask yourself in that situation, is just the why. What is it that prevents you from moving forward without the use of someone else, right? It's clearly something parasitical or vampirism if you can't move forward without a host, right? So I think that's worth being questioned. And it is true that we do see a lot of contactee contactees on pedestals kind of go that route. And I often wonder if maybe that's the business side of this, where kind of the dynamic of creating a monster and then a savior to rescue them from. Because we do see that a lot in this community, where, you know, be scared of this, be scared of that, and then, oh, well, this is going to come save you from it, but it couldn't save you from it. Now we have this problem, and so this is going to come along and save you from that. But at the 0 hour, that couldn't happen, and it's kind of a circle of this, you know, be in fear, stand down, stop, stand down, just don't do anything and wait. I'll be in fear again, stand down, just wait, you know, and that's very dangerous, because you're wasting time, you're wasting energy, you're wasting your potential.
Yeah, for sure. That's a very dangerous syndrome. Again, also, you know, again, waiting for ET to rescue you. And also, I have to say that I want to just also talk a little bit about this notion of, I don't know what to call it, but doom and gloom, cataclysms, you know, the end of the earth, the end of humanity, right around the corner. In other words, every Camelot has seen this every year. There's another story about how it's usually there are certain months when it's really prevalent. September, October, November, there's lots of stuff, doom and gloom like that, you know, everything is going to go to trash. We're all going to end up in FEMA camps, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, because I interview people, and I've written articles about this lately to try to clarify for people to understand, it doesn't mean that I agree with them. And it doesn't even mean that what they're saying is true, or that I consider it true. I usually interview somebody because I think what they're saying is worth considering, and that it's part of the dialogue that we're all part of. And it really may be that they're touching on these certain sort of hotbed issues that everyone is concerned with at this time. So it doesn't matter that that person fully and completely believes that, you know, Planet X is going to be here tomorrow, and this and that and the other thing is going to happen. We have whistleblowers going back it's now over 10 years that have said these things. Some are actually happening. Others haven't happened at all. Some people have called wolves so many times that no one will believe them anymore. Timing is a huge problem, you know, in this hologram that we're part of. So it's, you know, it's kind of like, do you want a drug to a responsibility of actually really self-realizing yourself here on planet Earth? And is that drug, you know, whether it's fear or whether it's some cataclysm that you believe you've got to prepare for so you can't actually develop yourself, and so on. You know, you have to weigh and balance, and I'm not here to say one way or the other for you, and I never will. I think that it is so important that people sort of be able to pierce through and understand that we do have this thing, which is a combination of the heart and the mind, which creates resonance. And when something resonates, you really actually can learn on a psychic and spiritual level what really vibrates as truth for you. And it's also important to know that a lot of so-called religious texts, whether it be the Bible, written by a bunch of men who had a certain agenda, in my view, and may have some truth in it, but also has a huge amount of falsity and a certain, you know, leaning, trying to control humanity. And so you've got distortion all along the way. And you've also got things like the raw material. And not everything in the raw material is true or correct. And what do I mean by true or correct? It's understanding that when an ET or race or human, either way, is trying to convey a concept to you, they're looking at it from a certain perspective. If they're in 3D and they see it as 3D, or they're talking to you as if you're in 3D, what is truth may actually leave out a huge amount because you're not seeing the other multidimensional aspects of that concept. And so I wonder, Shane, with some of your training, if you want to, talk about that.
Well, I think that pretty much everything that we have in the public is subject to that, where it's nothing is 100% true. Even the people who are writing it kind of know that. I mean, most authors, even when I tell a story, there could be things that I'm leaving out. There could be things that I'm misremembering. There could be things that I wrote down wrong, and the same thing is true with all accounts of history, religious texts, and, material through channels. Because again, you're taking, it's like that game of telephone. You're taking a message and you're passing it through a filter, and that filter is going to catch some things and it's going to catch other things, and that filter has a shape and dimensions that shape the message. With something like, the law of one material, that's a good example of that, where there's a very beautiful and a very positive message in there, and there's some very beautiful and very positive and very real concepts in there. And then there's some concepts that are questionable, like the idea of a harvest, and the idea of, the hierarchical structure of souls, and these souls getting to make decisions for those souls, and those things are questionable. So I think that, we have certain phrases like "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater," but you also can't excuse the dirty bathwater and just leave the baby sitting in it. You do have to kind of put that through your own filter and try your best to distinguish between the two. And it's very dangerous, in my opinion, to think that any one religion or any one spiritual text is the ultimate, the path, the way, and the only path and the only way. And my personal opinion or belief is that most ETs recognize that there's, what's the phrase that we use, most different strokes for different folks, or different people have different ways of learning. And therefore, some messages need to be presented slightly differently or catered to the audience, so to speak. And all of that comes into play when you're dealing with any one of these books or scrolls, or even a set of, like, what we call the Akashic records, or some set of like holographic hall of records. It's still only going to be a part of the story. So, the only danger, again, as I said before, is just developing that absolute behind it. Take everything as information, take everything as ideas and concepts, and maybe the only thing that should be true to you is what is true within you.
Sorry about that. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Well said. I can see that. Sorry for the interruption in the background there. So in terms of, just wanted to kind of circle around to this notion of giants, because we did talk about it in the past, and you had some very interesting direct experiences with that. I wanted to get an update from you on that. So do you have anything more to say about that subject that maybe didn't get said last time, or things that have developed since then?
Unfortunately, not really. I think that if anything's been going on in that regard, I've probably been cut off from said information. If I don't believe that anything is, but if anything were going on, I wouldn't really even expect to be privy to it, almost just for the fact that I've kind of spoken about it. But as far as I know, no, that it was kind of a series of isolated instances that they dealt with. And I'm sure it will come around again sometime in the future, but nothing recently, nothing since we last spoke. It's been an interesting thing for me to kind of watched the reaction to that since. You had actually done an interview not that long ago with a couple of researchers about giants, and it was kind of funny to me listening to them give some descriptions, because they were saying some of the same things that I was saying, but they were doing a better job of painting the picture. It's a skill I kind of lack, is doing a very good job of describing things that I've seen. So, but I thought it was funny when they started getting into the certain height range that I was talking, is when they started using some of the same words, like pointy was something that I said, like long pointy noses, long pointy ears, things like that. So it's been interesting to me to see how much research is out there and how it's really ignored. Like, it's really something that people have thrown out almost completely. There's been a couple little hoaxes that have been tied into that, like say Photoshop challenge to try and make a giant skeleton, and now any picture that gets put up of a oversized skeleton, a lot of people say, oh no, that's just Photoshop, and refer to the Snopes article and the Photoshop challenge out there, which is, you know, kind of how disinformation works from the agencies into our communities. But it's been interesting. There is a lot of different information that kind of supports what I had said, is that, like, the diversity even in giants, you know, that there was many different types of giants, that there was different species of giants, that giants had come here from various places and had their own tribes, and those own tribes had different ideas. And all the research that I've found since we spoke last has been very supportive of that, and that supports everything we've talked about today. So yeah, that's another kind of tip off to the fact that looking at things in terms of, you know, Palladians or Andromedans or Nordics, or just trying to put a generality on that, like giants, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I can say that, you know, that was a very interesting interview, and a lot of people, you know, have watched it. And it is interesting because the people you're talking about, I think it's Hugh Newman and Jim Vieira is who I interviewed about giants. They wrote a book about the giants, coming at it as a completely different direction than you. And yet there were things that they'd found out that were very, very similar to what some of the things you'd said. And more and more actually seems, at least to me, to be coming out in the literature and in people's hearing about the different, you know, beings. And you know, again, this classification of giants is an interesting one, because what is a giant, like from a human point of view?
Yeah, exactly.
When you get 9 feet, or is it higher, or like 12, or is it higher than that? Is it 24? You know, and in other words, what are we really talking about? That whole idea. So there seems to be no doubt about it that there's a lot of undiscovered evidence, and even the evidence that is here, of course, has been hidden. And it's the Smithsonian, like Hugh Newman was talking about, how the Smithsonian is actually part of the cover-up, in essence, obviously run by certain people and so on and so forth. This information that they want to keep from humans, and this, you know, this is just part of there's so many subjects that they don't want humans to know about, and so many ways of thinking about being human that they don't want you to consider. So it's just, I just can't stress enough that if, you know, this conversation with Shane, what is about and has been about this idea to continue to question, even when you hear something from someone that you respect, and to look at the evidence that they're looking at. A lot of us out on the network, so to speak, at this time are what you might call our synthesizers. What does that mean? That means that we come along and we are filtering like a whole spectrum, or a whole lot of people, other people, that and evidence through us. And it can be useful to do that. It's actually a real job, but it's also important to go from us to research the individual evidence yourself, and the providence of information, as it's called. Follow the trail, follow the clues, and then reach your own conclusions, and find the things that resonate for you, because you may have a history that can be uncovered if you follow those clues, but you'll never learn your own history or learn about your own true ET contact, for example, if you just sort of mouth and mimic and so on other people that are saying the same things, that whatever they've learned. So it's like, find it out for the hard work. This is so important. And understand that whistleblowers are trying to save their lives. They're trying to save their families' lives and their loved ones' lives. So, like even Bob Dean, and I know, he's revered around the world as far as I know. And I can say that Bob has certain things he will never say. He will never tell you. And that's because he has loved ones still on this planet, and he is protecting them. And that's just the way it is. And he is not unique in that way. This is the way of whistleblowers. They are trying to save their own lives and their families' lives. And they are doing a service. They will tell you a certain amount of truth. And then it's really, you're on your own from there. So Shane, the same with you. You're in a position where you have knowledge in certain areas that you tried to share. And you, I think, would be the first one to admit that you had areas where you actually couldn't share some of the deeper, maybe, information that you have, simply because you have to save your own life, so to speak.
Yeah, and other things that I feel like would be non-helpful are other things that I might, not share. Like, say, like I won't go through in detail, say the details of abuse, because I don't find that helpful. I mean, the information's out there. It's you can find it. Hearing another horror story isn't going to help you. So we make decisions like that. We all do it, right? Like, not just whistleblowers. I mean, if you have a job, if you have staff who work underneath you, you make the same type of decisions. Like the idea of need to know, and it's not always secretive in the sense that, I don't think that you're valuable enough to know this information. It's just sometimes we don't know the effects of saying certain things, or what the result of even giving you an idea or a concept could have. It's a big part of this whole discussion. You don't really always know, even if you're coming from a good place, you don't always know the end result of your actions. So, I make those decision-making processes, like gut checks before I speak on a certain subject, to make sure that I'm not, repeating something that's just pure speculation and I'm really not sure, or just speaking out of my ear about, or anything that may harm you or me or us. And yeah, I think that needs to be understood. Another thing that needs to be understood is we're not always right. I mean, like, none of us are experts. I mean, like, there's things that I've witnessed that could have very well been elaborate plays, or could have been figments of my imagination, could have been part of a simulation I was run through. There's so many variables on that too. Something that's kind of happened within our community is, like, say I've had a set of experiences that sound really similar to someone else who came out before with their experiences, and they put a name on a project. I come along and I hear their experiences. It sounds so similar to what I went through that I assume that I was part of the same project, and I start repeating that same name, project whatever. And then all of a sudden the mythology about project whatever starts spiraling out of control, because people are just kind of piling on their experiences on top of that, and all putting all the eggs in the same basket. And then when someone comes along years later and starts researching project whatever, they aren't going to find, they're going to find a big mess of information, and they're not going to be able to put it all together and make sense of it. So there's dangers that we commit upon ourselves by putting out information we're not sure of. So that's got to be something that we consider as speakers and as listeners. when dealing with all of this. And like I said, as long as you're not making absolutes, again, you're just taking anything I say or anything any other whistleblower or contactee ever says as a possibility. You're not going to damage yourself with that, because you're not going to establish a belief system around it.
Absolutely. What I want to do now, and I hope you have time for this, I have another device. I want to see if I can get some questions from the audience off of there. So if you'll just stand by for one moment, and you're welcome to use this opportunity to talk about whatever you'd like that I haven't asked you or we haven't brought up. If there's any thoughts you have, I'm just going to run across the room and get my my iPad and see if I can see what questions happen to be cropping up here in the meanwhile.
Sure. I think it's a natural function of our brains, but we tend to be reductionists. We try to take everything we learn and reduce it into a very small, simple, easy to understand package. And when we're dealing with extraterrestrials, interdimensional entities, even the diversity amongst humans, that doesn't always work. And sometimes we have to expand our viewpoints and consider that, you know, there could be a species of extraterrestrial, let's just say the Draco. The Draco could be physical entities and non-physical entities, and could do things on a physical level and on a non-physical level. And if you're trying to reduce that to being one or the other, you may run into a lot of conflicting information that just really confuses you and isn't benefiting you. But if you keep that open mind, or the wider perspective that it could be both, just like what we said off the top here, you know, ETs could be gods, could be angels, could be demons, could be none of the above, could be all of the above. You're not gonna put yourself in the trap where you're limiting yourself in terms of what you're capable of imagining.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm going to have to turn the sound off here. Okay, now. So I'm actually looking to see if I'm going to be able to do this. So if you'll just bear with me 1 second.
I guess another dynamic that plays into our community is looking for other people to vet information for us. It's always good to ask other people their opinions, but there's no whistleblower out there who's an authority on any one subject. There's no researcher out there who's an authority on any one subject. There's some researchers out there that I highly respect, that they come across information that I can see how their conclusion is maybe biased or skewed in some way, or I just simply disagree with. That's all healthy, it's all good, and you know, just try and keep an open mind to everything. Keep it as a concept, keep it as an idea. Realize that they're human, or they're encountering a physical experience just like you are, and really trust yourself more than you trust me or trust anyone else. It's you're beautiful, powerful, magical creators, and don't forget that, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise or convince you otherwise by dazzling you with a really pretty story. I may have had experiences that you haven't, but that doesn't make me a better person. It doesn't make me smarter or wiser. It doesn't make me any better at Monopoly. Doesn't make me anything. It just means that I've had experiences that I can share with you. You've had experiences that you can share with me that could be just as important or valuable to my life as well. And that's why I invite you all to do so.
I did find the questions. So I have some questions here that are in the chat, so I can ask them from the crowd. And again, if you do have a question, put them in all caps. That does help me to find them quickly. Someone does ask here a good question, which is, I had actually put the stargates that were recently, well, they attempted to erect a Stargate, as you may have heard in New York. They weren't successful there, but they did manage to put a temporary Stargate up in London, although they they said it wasn't the actual Stargate. It was another part of the Palmyra colonnade, as they called it. And someone wanted me to ask you, Shane, if you had the Stargates and the fact that they have, if you looked into that, they apparently want to continue to do this all around the earth. Have you heard this?
I have. I've heard kind of conflicting versions of what it's all about. Some people that I've talked to about what they call the Archibald gate and not a Stargate, and then their belief is that what it's doing is actually, let's say, marking the soul for harvest, so to speak. There's other belief systems, obviously, that they are stargates, like actual portals that come from off-world onto this world, and that are going to be used at some point in time to bring in ETs, or that same view could be bring in demons or bring in angels to could bring it back to the topic. But yeah, I've heard about it. Time will tell exactly whether or not that's something that I've noticed dealing with these people is a lot of the time they'll have beliefs that something like that is real, but then when they do it, they find out that it's not. And me personally, I think that they're wrong in their assertion of what erecting these stargates around will do, but I may be wrong in that. So yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give you. Is I've heard about it, but I've heard a lot of different conflicting things, so I don't have any absolute or certain viewpoint on it.
Okay, someone here wants me to ask you if there's breathable air on the moon.
As far as I've heard, or no, that there's not. They use entrapments or enclosures to produce such things.
Okay, and let me see if there's anything else. Why does Shane paint the Blue Avian Info as being an ET savior program? Is this something? I don't think you've said that in this conversation I've had with you here. Is that something that you think, Shane, or do you want to qualify that question at all?
I said it in a recent interview I did, which is probably what they're referencing.
Okay.
Time has gone by. It's been about a year since the first presentation of this particular topic. That particular topic and that presentation of the agenda, let's call it, behind these has changed over time, and that's not my opinion. That's just what I've observed based on what was written by the channel putting it out. It's definitely, like, it was drawn to my attention because I don't follow that stream of information. It was shown to me, and the person showing it to me said, "Hey, look at this. It's a bit of a 180." And when I read it, I saw exactly what they meant. Where you can call it, maybe it's not a change, maybe it's just a revelation of more information, but it does paint a very different picture than the first time it was presented. That is my opinion viewing the material. I know that that's not an opinion that I share or I'm alone in. A lot of people who have been following this since the beginning are feeling the same, that the story keeps changing over time in order to fit time. And that's where my opinion comes from, is having observed it since the beginning. I do feel it's changed dramatically since the beginning.
Okay, fair enough. I haven't followed it hardly at all. I did read over some stuff earlier, at a certain point, maybe midway through, but I didn't see much there that was new, to be really honest with you. I saw a lot of the stuff that's already out there. And I think it's important to give credit where credit's due. I think a lot of talk was about the secret space program, and that's been out there. Well, Camelot's been involved in revealing that for at least 10 years. And I know that there are lots of other people and other organizations doing the same thing. So I haven't seen anything new there. Let me see. Somebody says, do ETs telepathically attack people? Which ones, and how to defend against it?
They do. I mean, we do it to each other. They do it to us, of course. Which ones is way too big of a question. Kind of the topic of this whole discussion is that there's a very diverse universe out there, and to try and limit it down to which ones is impossible for me to do, sorry. How to defend against it? There's a lot of different techniques. What I try to stress to people the most is that most ritual or magic is just kind of a process of manifesting, which means creating some type of ritual or some type of exercise that makes your brain, your mind, believe that it's real, and therefore manifests it as real. So that's why I kind of encourage people to look at a lot of different methods and try them and find what works best for them and what they can imagine the strongest, what they can put their intention behind the strongest. So, and again, circumstance based. I mean, telepathic communication, the best thing to do to defend yourself against it is try and cut it off altogether. My own personal method for that is kind of to imagine a violet colored like sphere or orb around myself that works as a type of force field. I've heard other people use the same color. I have another color that I hear frequently used is like a gold light color or white light color. So again, it's there's lots of different ways out there. I can tell you what works for me, which is the violet orb, but ask other people the same question, find some different examples of what other people do, try them for yourself, and whatever you can get your conviction behind the strongest is what you should focus on for yourself.
Fair enough. One thing that I wanted to talk about just briefly was this notion of, because a lot of people are kind of mystified by the what we kind of put in this bucket, which we call the Illuminati. And in all fairness, that's a really generalized phrase, as similar to Anunnaki, but it has some meaning, and even meaning within their own ranks. But I do want to say that it is important to understand what they're trying to get at, even though I may not approve of their methods, so to speak. And I wondered if you would talk about this a little bit, if you have interest in it, which is the notion that what they're using is negative reinforcement to force what is in essence the spirit to come out of the vessel. And that means your spirit or the spirit of their child, whoever they're abusing, to actually break the bounds of the vessel that they inhabit. And to, so it's a twisted way of doing it, but it does have some results. And I wonder, Shane, do you feel that this happened to you in particular? Can you talk a little bit about it if you have interest in it?
Well, that is kind of what they use. Another analogy would be kind of throwing a child in the deep end of the pool, and they learn how to swim by doing. There's obviously better ways of achieving that, but I mean, the child will figure out how to swim. Same type of idea, I think or same approach, I guess, that they take to a lot of that is they understand that you can either learn how to train your will to create an OB, or you can suffer trauma and do it as a reactionary result. And sometimes in order to teach people the dynamics of something, they will use the negative result. And it's the same dynamic that plays into, like, the Jedi idea of the light side and the dark, or the light path and the dark path. The dark path is a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. And so that's why they, in those cases, use the dark path. It's quicker and easier. It's a lot less time than trying to train the child on how to do it on their own. Kind of like a lot of people would learn how to lucid dream by doing it accidentally. Same type of idea. Right,
except that there is the compulsion side of it. And they are, you can also look at your own soul and your own soul trajectory, people that put themselves in dire situations. What is the soul really doing? Because you're actually you are creating your reality, as much as, and it's important to, in my view, to take responsibility for that. So if your higher self, if your soul has allowed certain things to happen to you, it's because your soul has decided that that might be the path in which you might trigger an awakening in yourself. And so some human beings choose these sort of sudden awakening, these what are very similar to the tactics of the Illuminati for themselves. So they actually do it to themselves that way. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it damages them, worse. Sometimes it kills them and they have to come back and try all over again. But it is worth noting that the Illuminatis are not the only ones that use these techniques. Techniques are just techniques. And souls do sometimes choose the negative route. So if you find yourself choosing a negative route by which to learn, understand that you may, have done that for a purpose. Whether or not it was, the wisest choice is another matter. You could kind of talk about that. So any thoughts about that, Shane?
Even whether or not it was a wisest choice, it may not seem like a very wise choice while you're going through it, but maybe in hindsight, you'll look back at it and say, hey, that's why I did that, right?
Right.
I kind of, people bandy around the word faith, and the only thing faith really means to me is an understanding that I exist at multiple levels of reality, that this physical reality, life that I'm living is only one of those levels, and that I can trust that whatever I'm doing at those other levels is being looked after by myself at those levels. And I don't need to spend my time from this level worried about or in fear of what might be going on at those levels. And so with that in mind, I'm not even really sure where I was going with that story.
No, I got it. Like having faith in oneself, faith in one's own higher self, in the trajectory that you've chosen.
Yeah, exactly. And that even though it may seem really bad right now, there may be a higher purpose to it.
Yeah, I think that's key. I'm just looking quickly. Bob Dean is not in good health. He is having a lot of trouble at this time. He may be trying to transition into, out of this earthly dimension. So if you can put your hopes and dreams or wishes for him in a positive light and send him good energy to transition easily and well, if that's his choice, totally in his own soul choice, then please. Is having some trouble at this time. So I think we just lost Shane. Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Told me the call had ended and kicked me out there for a minute.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, nobody wanted me. Maybe we lost our audience at the same time. I don't know. Okay, well, we've got you anyway. So I was just skimming quickly through here to try to see if there was any other questions that I might have. Do aliens eat meat? For those of you out there who haven't heard my interview recalls, really, with Captain Mark Richards of the Secret Space Program, there's 4 of them on my website. If you just do a search under Richards, they should come up, as well as his wife, Joanne Richards. And on my Project Camelot TV network, she has a show every week, and she's talking a lot about the reptilian who they feel have gone in a more positive direction. And they sure as hell eat human meat and have eaten human meat, and reptilians certainly do. This is, actually very prevalent. There's lots of evidence of that. So for the person who's not aware of that. Trying to see if there's anything else. Okay, I don't think I see any other questions here that I can grab real quick. I know we've had you on for a while, Shane. Is there any parting words you want to say here?
I guess just to kind of wrap up on the savior topic, definitely look into the etymology of what the word means. It's not as our image of what it means. It's got a simpler definition, and it does mean just simply to save, to heal, or to deliver someone from peril. It's not always a negative thing. Like, obviously saving someone or healing someone or delivering them from peril is not always a negative thing, but that word is defining those actions, and if those are the actions, then that word applies. And so a lot of the time when I use the word savior, that's really all I'm saying, is that I'm not even saying that that a savior race has bad intentions. I'm just saying that they're playing a savior. And like we've spoken about a lot here, sometimes even good intentions can have negative results. Sometimes even wishing to save something can have a negative result. And that's the reason why I think that we should be aware of it, or at least question it when it comes up. And aside from that, just trying to reinstill in people that you are very, very capable of existing within this dimension. You are very, very capable of developing your own abilities, your own contact, your own, whatever you want to call it, psychic ability, telepathic ability. You have an incredible amount of power within this reality, and anyone who's trying to control you is simply trying to make you not believe that. So if you want to get out of the control, just don't believe what they're trying to make you believe, and you won't be controllable.
Yeah, I think it's if any one message could be taken from this discussion, I think empowerment, human empowerment, is what we're really talking about. This is a grand experiment. This human race, humanity on this planet. I think it's important that we sort of save ourselves, and that we safeguard this experiment, the integrity of the experiment, and that we empower ourselves and understand that what's being said and what is trying to be conveyed here is the amazing powers that have been given to humans, and that we have, if we do the necessary work to uncover those powers and capabilities and gifts. And that once we do that, if you can think of it in terms of, if all the races create other races and create other beings, and there's genetic engineering of those beings, then the hope should be that those beings go on to create still other races beyond them, and that each one allows the other the sovereignty to grow and to develop and to reach self-realization without necessarily interfering or becoming overbearing and trying to walk for them, not allowing them to develop their own skills and their own self-realization and own path trajectory back to source. So it's that sort of notion of the greatest freedom, the greatest empowerment is really the energy that at least I'm interested in putting forth here, and I think Shane is as well. Shane, do you want to reply to that?
Yeah, it's everything. Everything's within you. It's already there. It's just a process of digging it back out and finding it again. And you're capable of it. You don't need X, Y, or Z species to do it for you. You don't need the government to do it for you. You don't need the Illuminati to do it for you. You don't need me to do it for you. You can do it for yourself. It takes a little bit of effort. It takes some time, but it's a fun experience in hindsight. So even on the days that it seems really dark, there will be a day where you look back at it and have a giggle. So enjoy the ride.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much, Shane. It's been a lot of fun talking with you, and I hope people have enjoyed this. It will go on to YouTube, and people will be able to, watch it. Anything you might have missed, I think we had pretty good reception, so I'm glad for that. And have a great night, everyone, and take care.
Different variables that I don't feel anyone can really speak from a place of authority on it, that we all have a piece of the puzzle and we need to share these stories amongst ourselves in order to see the picture from a wider place. And that's what I'm trying to do, is just trying to help people have a different type of way of looking at things.
Okay, fair enough. So can you, just to kind of broach this subject, we were having, I guess, just a conversation really, and then this idea came up because we're just batting around the notion that around the internet that there seems to be a preoccupation with classifying ETs, or and I'm using ET, let me say, in a general sense, which could be anything from someone, from a being that is coming from underground. So we've got inner Earth civilizations, we've got interdimensionals, we've got things that could be, called demons, if you like, beings that don't necessarily have physical bodies that can inhabit or take over physical bodies temporarily anyway. And we've got so-called angels, who are not necessarily angels or, angelic, in the sense that they're not like, these little babies with wings as they're depicted. And we've got a history that involves the Anunnaki, and certainly the Illuminati coming, the link-ups between the Illuminati and the Anunnaki are pretty strong. Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. A lot of their the various cults, the mythology of the cult, or the religion of the cult, is centered around meetings with what people call Anunnaki, which is a kind of a generalized word for various contact with aliens, or extraterrestrials, or even interterrestrials. I think one of those names that's kind of been thrown on a bunch of different beings that it may or may not apply to.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And what we can say is that there is a general term that, at least to my knowledge, comes from the Sumerian tablets, and that we're referring to that particular group that we know of as the Anunnaki, a group that Sitchin was referring to, that talks about Anu as being, this father figure, and Enlil and Enki as brothers. So we're talking about that group specifically when I say Anunnaki anyway, and not just all ETs, for what it's worth. And I think that when I say that's the link up with the Illuminati that I see, and the bloodlines, and going back to Nibiru. Now there is another group of ETs that also are linked up, and maybe 7.
They're just as capable as being deceptive as any human. You can't assume they're not just because they seem like they're more advanced.
Absolutely.
And from there,
one thing that I also want to stress is that even the Anunnaki that are talked about, the Enki, Enlil stories that are in the Sumerian tablets, regardless of who interprets them, and I do know there's a huge, group of people out there that don't believe Zecharia Sitchin's interpretation was accurate. But regardless, if you go back to the tablets themselves, you can see that there were, these individuals are not gods, and they're not God, and they're not God-like, in the sense that unless you consider gods and godlike beings to be just like humans. In other words, they have petty jealousies, they have rivalries, they go to war, they abduct each other, they turn each other and others into slaves. So we're really talking about when we're talking about ETs, we're talking about beings that are capable of just about anything. And deception is also one of the number one things that they're notorious to do, actually, if you follow the abduction history and the contact history out there. And just because some being tells you they're Pleiadian, a lot of these beings have the ability, if they're able to go interdimensional and so on, and to beam themselves in, so to speak, in a physical body, not necessarily just on a craft. They can be manifesting as anything you want to see. They're going to access your mind. And so that if you want to see Jesus or Mary or whoever you want to see, or you want to see a nice, tall, blonde Nordic, then a gray can do that. And you may be dealing with a gray and not know it. So I think these kinds of cautionary statements are really, really important. And I also think that in general, we have sort of right now a group of people all over the internet who are having contact, who are saying their contact is the contact, and their beings are, the good beings, and they have the best things. And I mean, it's actually, well, I find it amusing. It's, it's like backing a football team or something like that. It's, I just think that humans have to be really careful about this kind of just accepting what anybody says, especially in the cult of personality, where you get maybe swayed by one person's popularity and what they're saying versus another person's. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's definitely, it is the fighting between contacts. My contact said this, my contact said that, is something that's all through this community. People kind of choose sides in that way, and that division is unnecessary when you are looking at things from a bigger picture of, there's seven.
Let's say Mohammed, whoever says they had ET contact, in essence, calls them gods, and then what they have to say, what they think, and so on. And I think this is a very dangerous ground to go down, road to go down. And I wanted to talk to Shane about that, his perspective, coming as he does from growing up in a kind of Illuminati, I guess you may say, family, and being trained in some of those ways. And then my own sort of background, having not been trained in those ways, but having studied it, preparation for what I do in Project Camelot. So that's kind of the setup for tonight's discussion. Shane, why don't you give yourself some background to start off with, and just kind of introduce yourself, talk a little bit about how you got into being the so-called ruiner, and because that's a very interesting sort of moniker, and also what you're doing now.
Well, it started with, and I posted it publicly on the internet. It wasn't promoted in any way, but it got picked up by various online or alternative community forums, and other people like yourself who started reaching out to me, and we ended up talking, and that's how a lot of people kind of came to know me. Actually, it was between the blog and my first interview with you. Since then, I finished the blog. I haven't written anything more to the Ruiner blog. I've written a new blog called The Whole World Laughing, and started doing podcasts with guests of my own, just people that I've met through the alternative community, and letting them share their stories, or encouraging them to share their stories, because there's a lot of people out there who've had various type of contact with the paranormal, extraterrestrials, what have you, secret societies, various black ops programs and stuff like that, who have stories to tell, and like yourself, I'm trying to give them an avenue in which to tell those stories. And so that's where I'm at kind of now, through kind of being raised within secret societies, people call Freemasons. I've been a part of at one point in time when I was young in my life, or at least not, when I say a part of, I mean that I was in contact with it, that I was around a lot of people who were Masons and a lot of people who were initiated in those orders. I was never initiated myself. So that's kind of a different, I was very young, so it was more of a testing, feeling out process of trying to find a place to fit me into that, and that never quite worked out. That's a lot of where the Ruiner name comes from. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at now, and of the alternative community, I just kind of want to share my experiences and my points of view on things. Don't ever like to be seen as any kind of an authority on anything, because my understanding of all of this is there's so much information, there's so many.
Actually, with the Illuminati very directly. One group that comes to mind is the ones from Aldebaran, that, and then really each of these groups seems to have a fairly high level of reptilian DNA, as far as I can tell. So at any rate, do you want to talk about what you're seeing in the community, and this sort of idea that ET is going to come and save us at some point? This kind of rubs me the wrong way. I think that we were talking about this notion that happens when individuals think that our Earth is in a rather desperate straits right now, depending on your perspective. And some people feel that ET is going to come down and save them. And I think that this is really actually can be quite damaging to human beings in general to carry this notion. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I agree with you. I think that it is dangerous to kind of carry that notion. It's kind of a dangerous notion to put authority in anyone or expectation of being saved into anyone. And so, especially with ETs, because the first blog that I wrote for The Whole World Laughing was called Vastness, and the idea basically behind that was that we need to kind of expand and refocus our ideas of various races out there, because it's not as simple as Pleiadians, right? Pleiades are a star system. There's many different races that come from the Pleiadians. So even if a race were to interact with you and describe themselves as Pleiadians, you still need to expand your focus on that and see that all that means is they come from the Pleiades. That's not their name, right? If you're from, if you're in Paris, let's say we were from Paris and I'm from Canada, we're going to have a very different culture. We're going to have a slightly different view of our own world, and we live on the same planet. So imagine, you lived on Mars and I lived on Earth, and we would definitely have a very different view of things. So if I'm interacting with you and I'm saying that I come from the Milky Way, that doesn't really narrow it down enough to explain what my intentions could be and what kind of affiliations I may have with other beings who come to you and say that they're from the Milky Way or from the Pleiades or any star system like that. And so starting there and expanding there, what that means is, just as like my neighbor and I may not get along, that Pleiadian and that Pleiadians may not get along either. And so if one is coming to make contact with a human and saying something like, we're here to save you, another one may be coming to another human and saying, we're here to do. Either one of them could be lying. So it's really not as simple as just understanding, like, they managed to get here, they've made contact with us, they're telling us one thing, they're just as capable of lying as any human.
Hi everyone, this is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, and tonight's going to be an extremely interesting discussion, I would say. And I am interviewing Shane the Ruiner for the second time. So our topic tonight is actually ETs, gods, angels, or demons. The idea is we're questioning, just actually having a discussion about the question, because the answer is probably endless. But at any rate, talking about ETs, how they're perceived, how they're often perceived as gods, angels, or demons, and how maybe all of those and none of those is correct. So that's our topic for the evening. And my guest again is Shane the Ruiner, and this is our second interview. And those of you that have seen the first interview will know that he is a fascinating guy. And let me get him on the screen here. So Shane, now you're live and in color. Say hello to everyone.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you again. Nice
and I think your sound is a little low, so if you could maybe speak a little louder. I'm going to see what mine looks like over here. And I don't, at the moment, I'm not sure how I'm going to, I don't have two computers. I'm actually traveling right now. So logistics, I don't know if I'll be able to catch. I might be able to figure out the questions. And if there was anyone out there that can help, then let me know if you can help or something like that. Not sure how you'll do that, but anyway, okay. So I guess what I want to say here is that Shane is, well, I dubbed him as an Illuminati whistleblower last time. I didn't necessarily refer to himself in that way. I'm not sure. But we did talk a lot about last time about the blue avians and various other subjects. And this time we really want to widen the parameters of what we're going to discuss, as I say, because I just want to sort of set this up, if that's okay with you, Shane, and say that, you know, out in the community, if you want to call it a community, very loosely sense of the word, is that people are tending to do what they did a long time ago when the Anunnaki arrived, which is kind of put the person who is reporting about the Anunnaki on a pedestal. So they're putting, you know, like they did in the religious texts with Abraham or Moses or whoever, or